Hey, thanks for tuning in. So, I have two mics, and one of them is really good, and one of them just comes with my headset. I was pulling from the incorrect mic. The audio quality is pretty terrible. I apologize. I understand it's unprofessional. I will do better. I hope you enjoy it nonetheless. And if you don't, I understand. Watch a different video. I'll fix the audio issue in the other ones.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, I'm ready to get started whenever you are, if you are.
Yeah, sure, I'm ready.
Yeah, so was this in specific response to a video that I posted specifically?
Yeah, so the original video that I was responding to, you had responded to Sean saying something about the French elections, about how they're
Right.
always about voting for the lesser evil. And you made this comment that the socialist candidate does exist and they got third place.
Right.
And so that this is evidence that socialism just isn't popular, and that what socialists really need to do is to just try to convince conservatives and make socialism more popular.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll go ahead and link the TikTok in.
Okay, so Macron, a neoliberal, just beat Le Pen, a nationalist, in France's general election. And Sean, a YouTube leftist, has some thoughts about that. He's essentially frustrated that general elections almost always boil down to the lesser of two evils, because that's not democracy, it's a hostage situation. Here's the problem with that line of thinking, okay? There is his candidate. There is a socialist right there in third place. I have no idea who told you that in a democracy, your beliefs will inherently be electable and or popular. And this right here encapsulates everything that I hate about leftist discourse online. We refuse to accept the fact that neoliberalism is popular and a nationalist has more sway over a population than a socialist. And when you isolate yourself into echo chambers and excise any fucking conservative or liberal who gives you any sort of slack, why are you surprised that these are the results? Like when you refuse to have a conversation with anyone who's not on your side but has a potential to be, but instead spend your time formalizing theory that's unapproachable to 90% of the population. How on earth are you surprised?
But yeah, that's a pretty fair, accurate. Basically, my frustration is, and I would definitely prefer the socialists. I would prefer Mélenchon to Macron. But I think that, yeah, this is a democracy, and I think that it's frustrating for people to say, hey, what happened with democracy when... Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, okay, so I mean, I have a couple. There's like a more there's a more basic criticism of this idea, and then there's a more complicated one that I'll get into later.
Sure.
The first more basic one, I guess, actually, you know what? I think I'm going to throw that out because it applies more to my knowledge of American elections and how they work in particular.
Okay.
Like I was going to talk about first past the post voting system.
Sure, but that's for sure.
Effect.
For sure, but
and I think that's very applicable here.
Well,
that's not my main argument.
Right, and to be clear, I just want to be super clear. France does not have that issue. They have third-party voting, and they have a structure that's specifically built to benefit the third parties as much as possible.
Yeah,
which is why
that's true. So France is a different situation.
Yeah, for sure. Right. But if you want to talk about electoralism in the United States and making that more equitable, I'm all for it. I love first past the post needs to be abolished. Electoral college. Et cetera, et cetera. Third parties need to be more viable in America, for sure.
For sure. All right, well, that aside,
sure.
There's the more complicated argument against electoralism under capitalism in general.
Okay.
And so I talked about this thing called capital strikes in the video that I made.
Okay.
It's basically this idea. It's not an organized strike. It is an event where capitalists will take their capital out of the market as a way to punish elected officials for doing things that harm
them. Do you have an example of this? So you're saying that business owners essentially will
not business owners. So this is investors. Investors sell their stock in exchange for liquid assets or assets in a different country.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And this results in a decrease in the economy. Right. And
sure.
It's not an organized thing that these business owners are doing this because they want to retaliate or whatever. But they're doing this because they have the idea that this elected official is going to be bad for the economy.
Sure.
So it's this kind of circular thinking where they think this this elected official is going to do things that are bad for the economy.
Sure.
So we're going to take all of our money out of the economy and we're going to harm the economy as an effect.
Sure.
Right.
Okay. I think I'm following.
And when it's discussed, when it's discussed broadly, it's called something called business confidence. So like the idea that like, oh, the business community has low confidence in the economy right now because we elected this person who wants to raise taxes or do
Sure.
that. Right.
Sure. I don't disagree with that. Okay.
And that directly harms voters who would vote for a given elected candidate, right?
Sure. So essentially what you're trying to say, let me reword it in a way just to make sure I'm understanding. What you're essentially saying is that when socialists end up gaining power, the people generally don't seem to prefer it, but it's not necessarily because the socialist is in power. It's mostly it's not because the socialist is doing any like physical harm. It's because investors are tanking the economy and working class people feel that and then see the socialist as, a negative force for them. So then they're like, let's get back to the neoliberals.
It's not even like I'm using very academic and abstract language here,
Mhm.
but it's something that's very well understood, and it's a main argument of conservatives that like, oh, if we tax the rich, they're just going to leave. That's exactly what that is.
For sure.
That the rich are going to leave, which means sell their assets and buy assets elsewhere.
Sure,
right?
But like,
which harms the economy.
For sure, but
and so my main argument is that elections are not a good measure of what the people want because the people are under duress.
Well, sure, but there's also like if your main argument is that people don't have confidence in socialism, like working in like any sort of real tangible way. And when we use the word socialist as well, Malin Khan wasn't a socialist. Like he's like a sock dem. Yeah, for sure. Something like that. Yeah. Which I'm a sock dem too. I don't know if you're aware. I wouldn't consider myself a socialist. But
I would consider myself a socialist.
Sure.
Or an anarchist or a communist. It's like, honestly, I'm not a Marxist-Leninist, but I am a communist.
Sure.
It's
Sure. I think what you're sort of pointing to is that people have less faith in the economy, and so the economy does worse, and working class people are harmed by that. But I don't see any real.
It's not that like normal people have less faith in the economy. It's that the business community, the people who own the most stocks, are able to make it true that the economy is going to.
Do you have real world examples of this occurring? Because I can't think of. I don't know how. Because we've never really had a socialist in power in America, or like any real socialist.
It's something that exists in threat, even if it's not something that exists in practice, right? Because like the thing that I was talking about, where people will argue, that if we tax the rich more, they'll leave. That, in a big, real way, that's true, and that's something that people worry about.
I don't know if that happens in practice. So here's something. I kind of want to go on a quick little tangent, real quick. So I grew up as a libertarian, and I sort of grew up with this very fundamental belief that, because people have told me this like my entire life, that we need to abolish the minimum wage. Okay, hear me out for just a second. This is something I believed as a kid, right? Because businesses will outcompete each other, and essentially it'll just rise back to where minimum wage is anyway, because that's how competition works. Now that works in my head as like a theory, and I can make sense of it, and I can't find like a natural criticism of that until I see it working in practice, and then I sort of go, oh wait, that's not how minimum wage works at all. It just drops to the floor. Like people just work for bare bones. And I think sort of my frustration with political theory in general is I don't necessarily see it work in practice at all times, and it's hard for me to just accept it when I see so many huge benefits to electoralism in general that leads me towards there, if that makes sense. Like, I guess what I'm just saying is this all feels sort of tangible or intangible.
Okay. I do believe that the thing that I'm saying is something that capitalists do and will do in practice.
Okay.
But that is not the crux of my argument. The crux of my argument is that the people believe that they can do that, and they can do that, and so the people will vote for candidates who do things that are good for the capitalists, because otherwise the capitalists can punish the people.
Sure, but
the
like
capitalists have this kind of power that is eminent and that affects all of the citizens. And so unless you're able to elect someone who'd like immediately abolishes private property or something,
sure,
you're always going to be working within the boundaries of what capitalism will allow.
sure, but I'll say two main things. The first, fuck, sorry, I completely lost my train of thought. I'm so bad at this slide. Fuck. I would need to. I've heard this a lot, that billionaires will essentially just like leave whenever they see it. But for the majority of the time, when I look at it, when you tax billionaires, they're usually okay with like not redirecting their entire businesses or like accounts in a different country, and they're like, yeah, you know what, this isn't that much of a big deal because the cost of like moving my business is so much higher. That's what I've generally seen in practice, like when I look at the sort of like the stats of it. Now, if you could show me where this is like actually happening, where a socialist will come in and empower it, well, I guess you said it was the threat of it, but I guess what I'm saying is I don't see this in practice very often. And if the thing is that it's really just a threat and it actually never works in practice, then we need to educate the people. We need to like tell them, hey, they're not going to leave. We need to tax them. And I don't see a huge problem. I don't see a way around this other than, hey, we need to show. Wait, sorry, real quick. We need to show one, how socialism will benefit the people. How and not necessarily like when I use the word socialism, maybe we should use the same definition here, because you did say abolish private property. I wouldn't necessarily go that far necessarily. I would probably.
So we're talking about different things. You're
sure.
talking about like Norway or Sweden.
Sure, but like you would probably agree that Bernie Sanders couldn't get elected for the same reason, right? You could probably fall under my
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, sick. So let's just use
if you ask a regular voter why you can't vote for Bernie Sanders, they'll say like, oh, I love him, but like if we do all of these things, then the billionaires are just going to like manufacture everything, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure, but I don't see that happening in practice. One. Two, I think that we can educate people and say, hey, it will work out in your benefit, because we can look at all of the other countries who have been able to make this work. And that's another big thing, is that like the Bernie Sanders of other countries got elected. Like a multitude of other countries were working under the framework of capitalism, and
even Bernie Sanders is working under the framework of capitalism.
Right, but they got elected, and they changed the system for free healthcare and free and all of that kind of stuff. Now, obviously, we're using two different definitions of socialism. You wouldn't consider that socialism.
I'm not saying that electing Bernie Sanders is impossible.
Okay,
right?
You're saying that someone who would abolish private property is impossible? I would agree with that.
What I'm saying is that electoralism will only get you as far as Bernie Sanders.
But so one, that's fine with me. And obviously I'm a little bit left of Bernie Sanders. I think that there's a lot of huge benefits that we can go for pushing as left, even more left than him. But when it comes to abolishing private property, I don't think the problem is the capitalists won't let that work. I think your huge problem here is that no one wants to abolish private property. Like you asked.
I'm not talking about abolishing private. I think. Okay, listen.
Okay,
I'm not saying that electing somebody like Bernie Sanders, electing somebody on the left wing, is impossible.
Sure.
I'm saying that it's more difficult than is legitimate, because elections under liberal capitalism are not legitimate. They're not like a fair representation of what the people want and what is good for the people.
How?
And because of the things that I was saying, because okay, obviously we can agree, right, that like campaign finance is an undemocratic stress
to some degree, sure. To some degree,
right.
But I will
agree that it's possible for somebody with a lot of money to use that money to influence elections.
Not over the will of the people. I don't believe that.
But the people's interests under capital, like as long as we're still under capital,
sure, that like
the people's interests are directly tied to the interests of capital.
Sure, that if you're saying what's good for the business owner is good for me because I work under the business owner, I would agree with that. But like, I don't necessarily understand what.
So if you had like some kind of hybrid system where you had feudalism and democracy at the same time,
okay,
but the democracy was doing something else, the democracy would not be able to abolish feudalism.
But I don't. One,
because things that harm the feudal lords and the serfs are in a relationship.
This is a weird example because feudalism did die under democracy. Like feudalism no longer exists and capitalism overtook it. Sure. I agree with that in some cases, but that's one. Most of feudalism was under a monarchy structure. So like this is a bit of a, I don't know of any like democratic. Yeah, sure. I would say probably under that hypothetical, if you were legitimately organizing like a democratic system where it was like, let's overtake these feudal lords, and like I do think that would be able to get passed as long as it
maybe the thing that we're not in line on here is the private property thing, because what I'm saying is that capitalists under a capitalist, liberal democratic system have an undemocratic power that is granted to them that seeps into every aspect of that society, including the parts of it that claim to be democratic.
I'm not disagreeing,
and that's non-negotiable. That's always going to happen. You can't do any amount of regulation that will stop that from happening.
I do hear that, and what I will say is most of my video is talking about a lot smaller steps than what you're discussing, right? Because you're sort of saying, how do we abolish the private property? But even in your example, you would absolutely agree that. Well, I guess what is?
I'm not. Listen.
Okay. Let me ask you a quick question.
I'm not one of these anarchists who says that like people shouldn't vote.
Okay, that was my question. Was what was your prescription?
Obviously, a liberal's better than a fascist.
Sure. Sure.
And obviously,
I appreciate
better than a liberal.
I appreciate you telling me that. Yeah.
Of course.
I get some crazy. Sure.
I will say. And we live under capitalism. People are working 40 hours a week. There is a degree to which people have to pick and choose what kinds of action they're going to do in order to better their lives, right? And if somebody was asking me whether they should go canvass for Bernie Sanders or whether they should go put the same energy into organizing their workplace under a union, I would advocate that they do the second one. I think that it shows more direct benefits.
I wouldn't disagree. See, I wouldn't even disagree with that. Yeah. And like maybe we just actually agree more than we thought we did. But like if you're saying like, hey, here's what I'll say.
I mean, better is good. I'm not going to say better is not good.
Sure. What I'll say is I very much disagree and legitimately maybe dislike some people who say we shouldn't vote at all. However, if you're one of those anarchists who are like, hey, let's take to the streets, let's use mutual aid, let's fucking like feed the people, I'm not going to criticize you one bit, okay? You're doing more work than I am, okay? Now, I'm frustrated that you won't even go to the voting poll, but like that benefit is so strong that I would never disagree with that. But I'm like, let's have both, you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean my argument is that electoralism is fundamentally limited. That was my main argument.
For sure. Okay, gotcha.
Also my argument is that the fact that one candidate wins over another is not adequate evidence of what the people want and what the people.
I hear your criticism, but I would also say that if you poll the average person about whether or not they would have Macron, Le Pen, or Mélenchon, right? So the neoliberal, the fascist, or the socialist, or Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, or Joe Biden,
those three.
Right? Mm-hmm. Those three, the vast majority of people would legitimately believe in would rather have Joe Biden. Now if your point is people don't fucking know what they want, they vote against their own self-interest, I'd agree with that for sure. But I don't see any other focus, which I think the point of my video, I don't see any other conclusion to take other than we gotta fucking talk to people. We got to get the conservative on our side. We got to go talk to the people who wouldn't vote for Bernie Sanders, who voted for Joe Biden, and say, bro, what is going on in your head? Try to explain this one to me, and then talk about these sort of things that you're talking about.
That's not where I would put my focus. I think that there's a lot more power in organizing like in creating organizations that are like separate from electoralism, that
like unions. I'm so
like
pro
unions.
unions. I'm so pro unions for sure.
Yeah.
I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Like I don't see how my criticism of saying that that this is anti-democracy
It is
is
unfortunately the case under capitalism. Hold on, this isn't actually an interesting point.
Okay.
But I recently read this, that even feudal serfs, like farmers working under monarchies,
yeah.
worked fewer hours a week than we do today.
Yeah.
40 hours a week.
I could believe that. But also there's a
And
lot
so when
of
you're asking
there-
regular people
what-
to do political activism, it's true that it's true to a degree that we can't walk and chew gum at the same time.
how so well, one what I would say, your point about feudal lords and the fact that we work 40 hours a week. Fucking America is one of the only countries that works 40 hours a week. You tell that to Canadians or to Europeans and they go buck wild. They say, how much are you fucking working? Like, your country is a shit show. Yeah, and I do think that we can, I don't know, I don't necessarily feel like I maybe understand your point about, like, if your point is it sucks right now and we need to get shit better, I totally understand. But I think Joe Biden is better than Donald Trump and can bring us to those places. And okay, so I guess
I don't think Joe Biden can bring us to those places. Joe Biden can bring us to like liberalism, but I mean that's kind of where we are.
Sure.
And elected officials in general can't bring us where we need to go.
But okay, so if I guess I agree with your point.
Even if you could elect Bernie Sanders, I think that he wouldn't be able to get a lot done because
we live in
the power of capitalism.
But also we live in a federalist state who like has a ton of power in the state governments and local governments. And like people who get mad at Joe Biden for like, you know, not slashing police budgets as if he has control over the budgets dictated by the state government. Like it feels very strange to me. That
I don't think that's the best representation of people's criticisms.
I've heard that criticism, and I would like to.
There's
but
much
you're
better
right.
criticism.
I agree, and I have criticisms of the guy as well, for sure. And
yeah, but what I think is that, like, when we criticize Joe Biden for not doing things that he could do by executive order, like descheduling marijuana or forgiving student loan debt, things that he could theoretically do. The reason he isn't doing those things is because of the things that I'm talking about. Capital strikes, business confidence, all of those things are preventing him and would prevent even Bernie Sanders or, you know, however left you can elect somebody from doing what really needs to be done.
I feel like if your point is like, I don't think that these people are necessarily.
My point is that the problems with capitalism can't be solved by electing the right people.
I don't think that these problems that people have with like abolishing student debt are necessarily unwarranted when they say, "Hey, I work for a company that like I thrive off of the ability to make sure that these get paid back."
Then that's where we need to get back to the private property conversation.
Sure.
Because.
And
yes, it is true. It is true that it literally does negatively affect people for their businesses to be harmed.
So here's
what I'm saying is that the ability for capitalists to do that to people is illegitimate fundamentally.
Here's my question then. Here's my question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you this sounds silly. Do you believe in a democracy? Do you believe in a democracy? Do you believe that 51% of what the people want legitimately should determine that the direction of the country?
Well, I mean, the people are under duress. That's my point. Yes, the people.
I'm not disagreeing
to do this,
but I guess what
but the reason people want to do this is because capitalism exists, and capitalism is forcing their hand.
Sure. But what I'm trying to say is, if your point is these people,
it's not as simple a question as what do the people want, is what I'm saying.
I get what you're trying to say, but what I'm trying to say is the people definitely want this, and that it is in some degree self-interested as well. So I don't see any alternative outside of this other than educating people, which I think was the structure of my argument. Is we need to start figuring out why people are so opposed to socialism, to a social democracy, to like any sort of flavor of socialism that you want to get. Even free healthcare is fucking unpopular here. Like it's how do we get people on our side? And that's really what I was advocating for in the video.
My argument would be it's not about getting people. It's not about convincing. I mean, it is, sure, it's about education, right? But a much larger part of it is building people power, is building things like unions, things like worker-owned collectives, and things like that, to make regular workers more capable of doing things that harm capitalists without harming themselves.
I would, okay, if your main frustration with my... If your main frustration with my video is that I wasn't comprehensive enough and that there are much better things that we could be doing, I wouldn't even disagree with that. I think that that's a fair criticism that you could levy against me and say, you know what, I don't get why you're so focused on voting. You should go out and fucking build a union. Now, I totally get that. But what I would say is my audience already knows that unions are good, but a lot of them are disagreeing on the voting thing. So that's where I'm focusing my time. Because I get so many fucking communists who are in my chat saying, dude, voting is a waste of time. It's not going to change anything. It's all a piece of shit. We just need to go out and like and build unions. I'm like, I get that, but also we can do this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you should vote.
Yeah, that's all. And yeah, it sounds like maybe we.
I mean, if we're on the same page,
yeah,
then maybe we should talk about private property or something.
Sure. I could definitely do that.
So here's my argument, because I came to this conclusion a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of ownership, like what things people are and aren't allowed to own, and what that means and what you can do with that, is a social construct. It's something that we decide on as a society. You used to be able to own people. We've decided that you can't do that, right? You, in our existing current society, you are able to own the houses that other people live in.
Yes.
I think that that's illegitimate.
I understand that. And what I would say is, I don't think that at its core, ethically, there is necessarily an issue with that, because I do think that there is a huge benefit that people can get from living temporarily in some places. Like the ability to rent for just
but that's different. Like you could have a system where all of the people collectively own the land, but there are still places to live temporarily.
I feel like
you don't have to have a landlord who charges rent in order to have temporary housing situations. I
guess my biggest frustration with like the private property question is it feels like liberalism covers it, where it's just like this seems like it's ripe for power imbalances. Let's just fix that issue, and let's make sure we have a bunch of fucking laws that say the landlord can't abuse the renter for a number of different reasons. And then I don't see any ethical dilemmas with the fact that like I'm renting my house right now. My landlord owns this building, but I know that I can leave at any point, and that's beneficial for me. So what's the structure that you're advocating for necessarily?
I'm advocating for the decommodification of land. I'm saying that you shouldn't be able to be in a relationship with a person where you have to pay them some amount of money every month, otherwise they can have cops come take you out of your house.
Sure.
That relationship, that position in society as a landlord is something that, once you step out of our context and think about it, is fundamentally exploitative.
Yeah,
we shouldn't have that.
But when we say fundamentally exploitative,
we get into the specifics about how to like actually decommodify housing. But what I'm saying is that landlords, that position isn't something that we should have.
I hear this sort of. What I'll say is I totally understand this idea that like a position of power is fundamentally exploitative, right? I don't think this is a kind of a hot take here. I think that, like for example, let's look at monopoly on violence. Are you familiar with that idea? That like the fact, essentially, it's a state, or that like in order to enforce some sort of laws, there needs to be some sort of entity that is able to enact that, is able to punish in some way, or like enforce that in some, punish is maybe a strong word, enforce that in some way. and they are, yeah. I recognize that that is ripe for exploitation, but I think the best way to recognize that is I don't see a better solution here. So instead of focusing in on the fact that that just needs to be abolished, let's make sure that that can't be exploited. That like we have a whole bunch of fucking laws put in place to ensure that that person cannot exploit the people below them, and that they're subject to the same laws that we are. And you know, what do you? Yeah, go ahead.
There used to be laws against abusing your slaves.
Yeah, but I don't.
But the fundamental relationship of slavery was the problem.
But I don't think that there is an ethical.
You can do as many regulations as you want.
I don't think there's an ethical issue with owning land as opposed to owning a person.
Well, I mean, you can own a little land, maybe. You can own like your house or something. Maybe you can own somebody. Maybe you can own one other house or something. You know, we can stretch the definition a little bit.
Okay.
But if you're owning like an entire city block or an entire building of people who live there, and like what is ownership mean?
But see, here's the question. If that's your issue, it's not ownership of land. It's in fact massive ownership of land. Antitrust laws would be able to fix that and just say, hey, we're gonna limit the amount of specific like.
Well, we can talk about antitrust laws, but you don't need to be a monopoly to be too big, in my opinion.
Well, that's antitrust laws aren't just for monopolies. It's for large enough corporations that can like create oligopolies where they control so much land that there's basically no room for other people, if that makes sense.
So is your argument that my problem is something that could be solved under liberal capitalism?
Yes, and liberal capitalism. Yes, and liberal capitalism is more.
If you can vote to stop, to end landlords, basically.
Yeah.
Or just like landlords who own more than one other house.
Sure.
I would say that that's tantamount to abolishing private property. That there's more to it than that, but that's a lot of it.
But I guess. So let's say.
My problem with private property extends to things beyond land. If we don't want to talk about land anymore, because we can also talk about things like businesses.
I haven't heard private property extend to businesses yet. I've almost always heard it in the context of like owning land. How does that extend it?
Are also private property.
Sure.
So okay.
The idea that you can the idea that you can sorry, I think I understand. The idea that you can invest in a business without actually working at it. Is that sort of the idea?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
That,
okay.
Like, an investor has money.
But
as a consequence, they own the burger flipping joint.
But I don't see
and then all of the people who actually make the value, including the people who built the building, those aren't the people who are getting the most value out of what is being created. There's some amount that's getting skimmed off of the top by this person who just gets that money because they are rich.
See, if we want to get into the ethical questions of this, I would love to, because I don't see this as an ethical issue. The fact that that you don't necessarily own all of the work and all of the consequences of the work that you put into a situation. I don't think that that's an ethical issue. I think that we do that all of the time, and we don't see anything wrong with that. I think the issue is almost exclusively when you don't have bargaining powers.
We do all the time.
So here's the thing.
What I'm saying,
but
I'm not arguing that every single person has to own all of their means of production. What I'm arguing is that the means of production should be owned by the people to whom they most clearly affect.
I don't see that as a should.
The 7-Eleven should be owned by the people who work at the 7-Eleven.
I don't see that as a should.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
I don't think they should. Or not should. I don't think that they need to. I don't think that that's an ethical issue that needs to be resolved. I'm all for co-ops when it works, and we should encourage them as much as possible, because I do think that there's a bunch of benefits that we can get out of it. But I don't see it as an ethical necessity akin to abolishing slavery. I don't see these as ethically similar in any way at all. I think that
we don't have to make. I mean, the comparison isn't in magnitude; it's in type.
Sure. But I would disagree with the type as well. I don't think that this is something that needs to be abolished. Like, here, can I give an example real quick? I'm just curious, because like, let's say, like, I think if once we scale down this idea of people need to own their own work, it falls apart in ways that I don't feel like I can reconcile. Because let's say I ask a friend, hey, can you drive me to work? Okay, and he's like, yeah, for sure, no problem. It's gonna cost some gas. Can you dip in like $10 or something, right? We agree to that. We say $10 for sure. Now I give him $10. He drives me to work, but I wouldn't have been able to get to work without him, and I made $200 when I go to work. I come back, I don't owe him a cent because we agreed with a very mutually beneficial idea. Hey, this is what's up?
Agreements between capitalists and workers are not legitimate agreements.
They can be,
because
though.
Capitalists have power over workers.
Not necessarily.
That
but
proletarians don't.
I feel like this is. I agree.
It's not the same as an agreement between.
I agree, but this is resolved through liberalism. I feel like because I see like three main issues with like the fact that workers have right now. One, if you decide not to work, you die. Okay, that's pretty well resolved through a lot of like liberal focus on food stamps and making sure that people have a right to housing and people have.
Here's another thing, right? Even in social democratic countries like Norway, I have other problems with these places. Right?
Sure.
But even in places like that, the entire political system has to be on its guard constantly to prevent businesses from rolling back the protections that those governments have made for their people.
I don't see
because because corporations and the entire capitalist class, their interests are to roll back those things in order to make capitalism work better, because homelessness exists as a threat to make people work harder, right? And so what I'm saying is that when you abolish an oppressive class, right, when you abolish the monarchy, for example, you don't then constantly have to work against a political party that is trying to reinstate the monarchy, because the monarchy isn't a political class that exists anymore. I'm saying that we should do that with capitalists, and then we won't have to constantly be like going to the polls and worrying about this and that and like trying to make sure that Margaret Thatcher doesn't show up to like liberalize the economy.
But we have threats that Margaret Thatcher will.
As long as you keep capitalism around, the beast inside capitalism is going to grow and get bigger and become a problem.
I think this issue that we're always going to be going to the polls to make sure that we are on the right track and that this is a continuous.
No, it's not. I'm not saying that going to the polls is the biggest problem.
No. But
as long as you.
But it's a threat. There's a threat. There's a threat.
It's always a threat.
I don't know if that threat could ever fully dissipate, that people will ever like legitimately not want to roll back a lot of progress that we have.
Is there a threat now of King George showing up and deciding that everybody is a subject of the Crown of England? No, not really. But there is a threat that we will roll back like labor laws. There is a threat that people will start being employed by companies like Uber, who are able to use a legal loophole to make sure that their workers aren't able to get benefits by listing them as something else. That's always a threat. But if you look back at, there's not a threat that we're going to reinstate slavery. I mean, I guess there's a threat that we could reinstate something similar. But you get what I'm saying.
I understand.
When you have this machine around that is designed to constantly grow unsustainably and exploit people's labor, as long as you keep that machine on, it's going to do the thing that it does.
I understand what you're trying to say, but I would say that legitimately, I do believe that the will of the people cannot be overtaken by this machine that we're referring to. And I can look at specific examples. I don't think that universal healthcare will ever get rolled back in those countries that we're in Canada or the UK or Germany. And maybe you're talking a little bit bigger than this, but all of these sort of
like before like Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, there were more cohesive social safety nets in the UK.
I don't disagree, but I think that
and those things were rolled back because of political parties who have all of their interests funded by the machine that kills people.
But I think that the strongest institutions, as long as people legitimately believe in it, they won't. I don't like for example Medicare or like Medicaid or things like that. If we ever abolish that, we're gonna get a riot in the fucking streets. no one will ever touch that shit. And even though there's this machine breeding breathing for the fact for us to like, hey, we're an insurance company and we want to fucking take help people, or we want to insure people who are over 65 or insure the people with disabilities. Because it's such a deeply popular sentiment, I don't see that ever getting rolled back, and I don't think that it could be. And I think the only resolution to this is get people on board with the politics and the benefits that they see around them at all times.
Yeah, but the process for that isn't just a matter of talking to people on the street.
Why not?
It's a matter of building people power so that people can do things against capital without it directly harming themselves.
Sure, but
and allowing people to directly negotiate with capitalists.
To be clear,
it's a way to give people the ability to improve their own lives without having to make the government do it for them.
To be clear, unions, like I don't want to fetishize unions a little bit. Well, I don't want to fetishize it too much because because if we abolish private property, that threatens union workers as well. They have an investment in the business that they created. In fact, like, because
there's nothing wrong with if we had a co-op, my version of abolishing private property doesn't make co-ops illegal.
So you're
like a group of people private means individual.
No,
if one person owns a whole business, obviously that's exploitative. But if a whole bunch of people, the people who make the value that the business generates, own the business collectively, like say they vote on what it does, right? That's not private property. That's a different kind of property. I'll
be honest, never really got into Marx, okay? I want to make sure I'm fully understanding this. Yeah, I want to make sure I'm fully understanding. Yeah, I want to make sure I'm fully understanding this differentiation between private and public and personal property, because if what you're saying is that a group of people can own land.
Yes.
Shareholders own a business, and like the business is owned and invested in by a multitude of people, including.
I'm not saying it's any group of people.
Okay.
I'm saying that if the In-N-Out down the street is owned by the people who work there, that's not private property. That's a new thing. That's something else. Private property is where,
so you wouldn't, you're saying you wouldn't touch unions.
Who has $1 million somewhere over living in a mansion in Florida owns the In-N-Out, and he gets to decide how long the workers work and how many, this or that.
I mean,
that's private property.
Here's what I will say. Okay.
All right.
The feasibility of this occurring under anything other than what I'm advocating for is impossible. Do you agree with that?
What
like liberalism, social democracy, right? Without that, you're gone. Do you agree with that?
The feasibility of this stuff happening under
abolishing private property under any structure other than a social democracy.
No, I wouldn't say that that's true.
Okay.
There are organizations like if you look at like the EZLN in Rojava, they're an anarchist-controlled section of Kurdish northern Syria. They're like libertarian socialists. They've done all of this crazy stuff. They emerged from like a civil war. People can create new social system. Like the idea that like one social system leads inevitably to the next one is wrong. You don't need a social democracy in order to abolish private property. You don't need any specific system in order to get to any other specific system.
But the idea that the United States or these huge large bodies of state are anywhere near to an anarchist like revolution is batshit. It would.
Yeah, it is a little wild. It's a little out there.
And like you need some heavy destabilization for anyone to turn to anarchists, and that's mostly because people think that anarchists are crazy. And like it's not just capital, but it's also a love of centralization and ease and utility that people get from the centralization of power. And I'm not saying that like anarchists are wrong. I mean, I do think that anarchists are wrong, but I'm not. That's everyone's perception, regardless of capital. I think
that people like centralization of power.
Yes, For sure.
I don't think that they do. I mean, if you ask like a person, like, what is like your, like, if you ask like an American, what is your, as an American, most treasured value?
Yeah.
They're gonna say freedom. They're not gonna say centralization.
They say that. They say that.
Hierarchy.
They say that, but they love the fucking convenience of having one corporation hold basically all of their control, because they love having an iPhone that just connects directly into their computer.
By the centralization of, okay, that is not tech. Okay, this is a classic liberal thing to do.
Okay,
there is not a one-to-one relationship between technological advancement and hierarchy.
Okay,
those are not the same thing.
Okay,
you don't need hierarchy in order to have an iPhone. You don't need hierarchy in order to have a central, like you're saying that it's nice that people are able to go to like the one big grocery store instead of having to, like, I don't know, go to like their neighbor in order to buy a single item.
What would you define as centralization of power? Can you give an example?
Centralization of power.
Or however you want to use it. What would you say that an anarchist would go in and break up?
So say you still have Target.
Okay.
But Target is owned collectively by the workers at Target.
As one corporation?
That is less centralized power.
I agree. But I also think that anarchists wouldn't want...
This actually makes me want to talk about antitrust.
Okay.
Because I have this idea about monopoly law. Like, if you're okay with talking about that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure. I can see how far my knowledge gets. Obviously, I talk about things in my video that I feel comfortable, like, with my knowledge about. Mm-hmm. So I might just have to dip out of a conversation and be like, you know what, I don't know enough here, but
totally fine.
Yeah. But if you want to go for it.
I think this is sort of my theory. I think that to a very real degree, competition between corporations is a farce. That in a lot of ways, they work mutually.
I agree.
They cooperate to each other's interests.
To some degree.
And they aren't necessarily always going to compete until they become a monopoly.
For sure, always. Or for sure, not always. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
And I think that antitrust law, the idea that we can just have capitalism and like break up monopolies when they start existing, and then that will like the corporations will compete with each other and drive prices down and make everything good for everybody, is false.
It depends. It depends. Like I think when you're looking at things that are inelastic, like specifically like if you're just looking at bread is basically as cheap as you can get it. That's my opinion. I don't know enough about just like basic grocery store, but I do fully believe that the way that we've like organized our supply chains, I do think that bread and most food and most like easily accessible items are as cheap as we can get it, and competition has lowered those prices. However, that does not extend to all businesses.
Because like in every business, there is a capitalist who isn't contributing, who is making money.
What do you mean?
So where's that money going if not into the prices of bread?
What do you wait? Hold on.
Or into the or out of the wages of the workers, right? So like so say somebody owns a grocery store.
Okay.
If the person who owns the grocery store doesn't make the bread, they don't move the bread into the grocery store.
Sure.
They don't put it on the shelves.
Sure.
They don't check people out. They don't. So they could be literally anyone.
They
don't need to exist.
I feel like sometimes
like the decisions they make could be made collectively by the people who own the grocery store, and the money that they're making is coming out of the amount of money that the workers would otherwise be making in their salaries, or it's coming out of the amount that people would otherwise be saving on the products that they're purchasing at that store.
Here's what I'll say. I think that sometimes I've had very, very terrible bosses that do almost exactly what you're talking about, and I've also had some pretty great bosses. And sometimes
making money.
No, hold on. Sorry. What you're talking about is contributing nothing to the corporation at all, and just basically sitting there just to boss people around. I think that there are what you're describing is not.
I'm not saying that all bosses do nothing, right?
But
I'm saying that the position that they're in is a position where they make money.
Yes.
Not according to the amount that they're actually contributing. Because the idea is that they're contributing by owning the business, by having the money, but that's not a real contribution. So to whatever degree that they're managing, you could hire a person who just does that job for the business. Say that the target is owned collectively, and they elect their managers, or they hire their managers.
I want to make a hold on.
We managers don't own the business.
We need a different we need to differentiate between managers and business owners. I was just about to say, which you were.
I don't think that's. I think there's a very obvious distinction. So like a manager is on the floor and they make actual management decisions.
For sure.
But a business owner would be like an investor. They just own the business.
But I don't
and they get to sit on the board and they get to tell the managers what to do and they get to collect dividends from the stocks.
See, my knowledge of economics is not as well versed as I would hope it to be, but I get that. Yeah. I do feel like,
So the business owner isn't actually contributing anything. Maybe the business owner hires a manager who is contributing something. Maybe the business owner is also acting as a manager, and then the manager, part of them, is contributing something. But the person who's owning the business, making dividends from stocks, on the board and getting to decide what the business does, that person gets to decide what the business does and gets to decide what everybody how they work.
Not necessarily. Often, in very macro senses, but like not necessarily micro. Like when you, I need to own stock, legitimate. I need to figure out how this shit works.
I own stock.
Yeah, and I should encourage people to do it because, like, Jesus, I need to find out like what actually sort of decisions actually get made on like those sort of like when you actually invest into a company. But I do.
You would have to own a lot of them.
No, for sure, to actually be a stockholder. I agree. Yeah. And investing is different from owning. But I do think that how do I say this? There needs to be some sort of investment structure in order for a business to actually run, to have some sort of like build up on the ground. Sure. And I do think that generally
investment structure was democratic and community based,
for sure,
instead of like hierarchical and like one guy gets to own $1 billion because he has already done all of the exploitation from all of the other businesses and now is able to carry that exploited money into ownership of other businesses. Like our existing system of investment and business ownership and like venture capital is not good. And so I'm not saying that it's not like every single business needs to not have seed money or anything like that. But that the process by which wait, hold on.
Yeah, no worries.
I have to take the trash out. It's Thursday.
Gotcha.
The system by which we as a society decide which businesses are going to start is capitalism, and it's not good. That we could have another one, and it would do a similar thing in a way that was more democratic.
Sure. I hear what you're saying, but I also don't necessarily disagree that there is this strong ethical need to decide this right now at the moment, and it feels like an odd conclusion when I see so much more issues that are pressing. Does that make sense?
Okay, so like what I'm saying that capitalism as a whole is a problem, and that private property of businesses and of land is a problem.
But I don't see that problem. Like here's sometimes
I'm not saying that I'm not even saying that it's a problem. I'm saying
you're saying it's the problem.
The problem.
Yeah.
That every other problem is downstream of capitalism.
I feel like that has to be shown in ways other than people have an incentive to want their businesses to do well. I don't think that's I don't see every problem as an offshoot of capitalism just because people have an incentive to.
Not every problem is capitalism, but all the problems that liberals talk about are capitalism.
Sure, but I also think that there's
not all of them. I mean, it's hard to come up with one. But sorry, okay. I'm sorry that I keep interrupting you. But
no, you're good. You're good. I guess my frustration sometimes feels like. How do I word this? Sometimes I lost my train of thought. Sorry, continue. going down what you were saying, which is, well, I don't know, basically just, so you're saying that every issue that liberalism has is essentially with capitalism.
Yeah, all the issues,
and what
all of the issues that liberals talk about, like, oh, like there's not like wages are too low, like wars are bad, imperialism and colonialism are harmful. Every single time that people talk about like student loans, parental leave, all of those problems are downstream of the central economic system that we're using.
See, I sometimes what it definitely feels like is,
and there's even more problems that liberals don't talk about that are also caused by capitalism.
Sure. Sometimes what it definitely feels like is Marxism is a really good lens to view society. But sometimes what it definitely feels like is we don't know when to take on and off those lenses to view specific issues. Because I do think that capital investment can describe a significant amount of issues and is a great lens to look through the world. But I don't think that explains everything. And I don't think it explains all of imperialism. I think that like nationalism is like the fact that you just have love for your country so fucking aggressive that you want to take over other countries. There's not necessarily always this capital.
I won't be the one that argues this, but people will definitely argue this, and they are right, that nationalism is also downstream of capitalism.
Yeah, I hear that, but I don't.
Fascism is what capitalism does when people are trying to get out of capitalism. When people are trying to get out of capitalism, fascism is one of the answers that capitalism takes.
It feels so abstract to me, and I think
I can hear that.
I think
so, there are people who can better describe that relationship than I can.
Sure.
But yeah, go on. What were you saying?
I guess what I'm trying to say is when it comes down to like my first example about how, when I used to have my libertarian teen phase, I thought that all of the problems would be fixed when we abolish minimum wage. And then you get to it and then you're like, shit, I didn't think about half of these things. And I think sometimes I'm interested in what communism and socialism have to offer, but I'm worried about a lot of these economic ramifications that we might not consider.
I agree that, okay, anybody who is going to come and sell you a blueprint for a completely new economy is lying. Yeah. Anybody who says that they know exactly how to set up the society that they want to live in is lying.
For sure.
Right? But the things that anarchists and socialists do, I would argue that Marxist-Leninists are the ones who are trying to come and bring you like a blueprint.
Sure. Right? Okay.
The thing that people like me are trying to do is argue that there are fundamental problems with the existing system. Say that there are a couple of problems that could be solved in these ways, and that we need these tendencies, we need these movements in order to bring us towards the place that we want to go. And what I'm saying is that we need to create more worker power organizations.
That's where I'm going to agree with everything that you're saying, though. Like everything that you're saying here, where we need to have like the bargaining powers in this country are fucked. And we need to like make sure that workers have more power. I'm 1,000% with you. I would fully agree with everything that you're saying there. You just sort of lose me when you sort of say we need to upturn so much of our capitalist and economic structures, when I don't necessarily feel like either of us are equipped to fully say how the economic ramifications of the systems that we're providing. And I guess my biggest argument for liberalism and the social democracy is we've seen it work. We've seen it do a lot of really great things. Well, okay, what?
No, I would not argue that we've seen liberalism work.
We've seen
it do some pretty shitty, terrible things. Sure, but we've also seen like people we've seen anarchists do fucking crazy things. Well, I mean, yeah, we've seen all kinds of crazy
shit. Sure. Right? But a
lot of crazy shit that exists today is downstream of capitalism and of the system that we have. Like the system that we have isn't like a fine baseline that like we should just chill with because it's like okay. I'm arguing that it's not okay. That it's a moral imperative that like the system that we have right now is fundamentally violent and is causing constant distress.
fundamentally violent. Could you explain what exactly you mean by that? Because I don't.
Evictions are violence.
What?
Evictions are violence.
Evictions
Homelessness is violence.
I agree, but like that's resolved through liberalism when we make sure that we have
No, it isn't.
We've had
when we make sure
liberalism
that for what? How many years?
no, but we don't have
eventually
safety. We don't have safety nets. For one, if you're saying that we shouldn't be spending, if you're saying that we should be spending the billions of dollars that it takes to fix homelessness, I would be right there with you. I don't think that that's a priority on a lot of people's minds, and I think it should be 1,000%. But I think that we can build safety nets in very reasonable ways, and a lot of social democracies have seen a lot of like Sweden has has almost completely abolished homelessness in their country.
Well, let me talk about the other problems with Sweden. With the other
and I'm
right?
not saying they're perfect, but I'm saying that's an issue that you're saying is downstream of capitalism that was resolved through liberalism.
Imperialism, so neo-imperialism, neo-colonialism, right? The idea that countries in the global south, South America, Africa,
yep.
Asia, right, are essentially run by Western corporations who have the power to build things there and then like give them loans from the IMF and bankrupt their countries if they don't do what they want, et cetera, et cetera. All of that is downstream of capitalism. And that kind of capitalism exists even if we give everybody free student loans, right?
Yeah, for sure. But if you're saying
are inherent to capitalism and fundamentally harmful and violent and are a moral imperative to stop.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree that unequal exchange with the global south is a moral imperative to stop. I would flatly agree with that. But I think that can be done.
That those things are fundamentally to capitalism?
Yes, for sure. And I would say that the reason it doesn't get done is because I don't think there's a drive to get it done at all in the States. I don't think that anyone here cares about that. Legitimate. I don't think anyone cares. I don't think anyone cares, or I don't think an even close to sufficient or significant percentage of the population is frustrated with the fact that we buy shit from the global south for a cheaper price than we would buy it here. I think a lot of people would say, "Oh, sick. Mm-hmm. They got a good deal out of it. Sick. We gave them some money. They gave us the shit that we needed." And I think that we need to shake people up a little bit and say, "Hey, let's make sure that let's start making sure that we give fair prices to the global south so that they can build a fucking economy beneath them that has been completely destabilized over the last 500 years or plus, whatever."
Mm-hmm.
I legitimately think that I think that sometimes we have this idea that capitalism is the reason for all of this occurring, but I think that legitimately it's because I don't think people care too much about politics, and I think that people are like, I'm okay. I see that my neighbors are okay.
Don't care that much about politics
because their lives are easy, because their lives are good.
No, it's because their lives are hard. People don't have the time and energy.
Okay, I do agree with that too.
They're working 40 hours a day.
I do agree with that.
And because they have to worry about, their fucking, I don't know, what do people worry about? Their car?
Sure, their car payments, mortgages, rent.
All of the parts of life which are made harder by capitalism. I'm arguing that political apathy is downstream of capitalism, not the other way around.
I don't. I think that people are politically apathetic, regardless of what system they live in.
Just because people are apathetic?
About the structures that they live in, yeah. I don't think, maybe apathy is not something that I would ascribe to people in general, but around political systems, yes. I do think that people are generally tune out when they think of economic ramifications of communism. They go, I don't want to hear about this, man. I want to care about something that I actually care about, which is my family, which is my community, which is my church, which is my whatever.
But all of those things are affected.
I don't disagree. But I think,
and so it is a matter of education.
Yes.
You can't just the education problem, like I said, is downstream of capitalism. The reason people don't have the time and the energy to learn.
This is why I'm saying you should just accept. You should absolutely be with me on making sure that there are safety nets for people who lose their jobs, who make sure that there are unions so that we have bargaining power so that they can make a fair wage so they don't have to work so fucking hard to make sure that they can take care of their families. And
doing
then
that without going the whole hog is always going to be a losing battle.
why? Why would you call it? Why would you call a losing battle so much harm reduction, so much good that we can see in society? I would never look at that and say that is a losing battle. That is a loss. So many people are.
You shouldn't fight losing battles that are good. But I'm saying that what I'm saying is that if you don't go the whole way, you're always going to be fighting for scraps. You're always going to be fighting for student loans. If you never make like a complete holistic criticism of the system that is causing all of the problems that you're facing.
I hear this so often that capitalism is the issue at large. But I'm not educated well enough in economics, and this is necessarily like an economic issue, right?
I argue that social issues, that the idea that like there's a fundamental separation between like social issues and economic issues is kind of
no, obviously they're intertwined, but I'm very much more well versed in real politics that are occurring right now in America than these like hypothetical systems that we might be able to build up that we've never really seen happen. That's not something that I understand the full ramifications of. That's not, and I don't think. Frankly, I don't think you do either, and that's why I'm sort of hesitant about the system.
Nobody does,
but I don't see it as a moral. I don't see it as a moral imperative to fully throw up the system if we don't even know what's going to happen. Just to throw up the system because we're saying that the issue is with the system and we don't know what to do after that. I think that you can make an argument
that we should just destroy capitalism and replace it with nothing. I'm arguing,
but replace it with something that you don't fully understand.
Well, I mean, how much are you going to say is fully understanding? We'll replace it with something that is new, and since it's new, nobody's going to 100% fully understand it.
I guess,
but we're going to be changing, and we're going to be doing new things. The argument that you're making is the argument that people would apply to overthrowing a monarch and installing.
But I see
it's a new system. Nobody knows exactly how it's going to go.
But I see a monarchy as an ethical evil. I see it as an ethical issue, and like I said, I don't.
How is capitalism not an ethical issue?
Like I said, it depends on how you define capitalism, but I think that private investment in a business is totally fine.
Private investment in a business.
How would you describe capitalism?
Of the whole system. Private investment in a business.
That's how I would describe capitalism.
The whole system that causes homelessness in America. That causes imperialism.
But wait, hold on. But private investment in businesses happen irrespective of homelessness, because we can look at countries who have solved homelessness that still have private investment in businesses.
Even those companies are doing imperialism in the global south. So,
but you can have
it's always still a moral imperative.
You can have capitalism that doesn't rely on the global south because there are capitalist structures in the global south.
No, you cannot.
I don't understand.
Also, capitalist structures existing in the global south doesn't mean that capitalism can exist outside of imperial.
It's thriving without anything exploiting.
Can't exist outside of imperial exploitation.
What?
Capitalism can't exist outside of imperialism and exploitation.
How?
It was generated in the exact same crucible.
But my question is
from the same place.
But my question is, if there are capitalist countries that you're saying are consistently being exploited and they're just being chipped out from the bottom, who are they exploiting below them? There's no other country to maybe I need to look at specific examples.
If a capitalist country is doing imperialism on some overexploited poor country.
Yeah.
The overexploited poor country is also living under capitalism. That's also a capitalist system.
But let's say
even Americans who are living.
But how are those businesses? How are those businesses in that country thriving when they have no one to exploit?
If to the degree that they are thriving.
But
if they're capitalist businesses.
What I'm trying to say is, it doesn't seem like
capitalism without exploitation isn't capitalism.
What?
And so,
are you saying it can't exist, or are you saying it won't exist, or are you saying that we just haven't seen it? I'm not sure what you mean by.
I'm saying that if you took all of the exploitation, if you actually took all of the exploitation out of capitalism, in a way that made it so that it wouldn't constantly keep growing and trying to exploit more,
Mm-hmm.
you would have a completely different system. You'd have some kind of socialism.
Is your claim that if you do that, you can still have private investment of businesses, but you wouldn't call it capitalism anymore, it would be socialism? Or are you saying if you do that, that will fundamentally tear away as well?
I'm saying that in order to take all of the exploitation out of capitalism and replace it with something else,
but I'm so lost
you
because
would have to get rid of private investment.
Because you can look at small countries like I don't know. I'm not going to use any specific example. But you can pick one of the countries in the global south that runs under a capitalist system. Who are they exploiting?
Their own people. That even if capitalism,
but that's not what imperialism is. Elsewhere. Are you saying that imperialism is when you have a business that has people underneath it? I don't understand because
capitalist businesses are fundamentally exploitative. Are we on that page? Because I don't know if
I understand you believe that. Yes.
Okay, so that is what I believe.
Yes.
And so I think that even if a business isn't doing imperialism in another country, isn't exploiting the workers of another country, they're exploiting the workers of their own country.
But that's sure. Okay, for sure. But I guess my point here right now is you just agreed that imperialism, which we can just look at exploitation of another country, can exist under capitalism. Imperialism
can exist under yeah.
Okay, great. So why can't we fix all the exploitation that's occurring in the global south under capitalism?
Wait, are you saying that it's possible to get rid of imperialism under capitalism?
Yes. Because we see that occur with countries that are stable without anyone to exploit. So
this goes back to the whole thing that like capitalism is a monster that we're trying to put in a cage. Right, that like even if you tried to like stop all of the businesses from doing imperialism in other countries,
I think
they would just grow until they're the size where they can do that, because that's like the whole ethos of capitalism, like growth at all costs.
I hear what you're saying.
So as long as you keep the demon alive, it's going to do the thing that it does.
I understand what you're saying, but I hope you understand that where I'm coming from, okay, where you we're sort of wrestling this demon under a cage, and you're helping us, okay? I'm not saying you're voting, you're doing the shit that I would advocate you to do, but there are some people who aren't even fucking helping with the demon, who are just standing there and just pointing to another demon that we don't even fully understand and we don't know how to grapple with.
It's not a demon in this metaphor. Wait, who's the other demon? Who's the other demon?
Communism. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how that's implemented. I don't know the economic ramifications of how that occurs. And I do know that every time we sort of like analyze co-ops working in the real world, there's like, it depends. Like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There's like a lot of like iffy factors to how exactly this would grow and sustain itself. And I don't feel comfortable just pointing to someone else that we haven't fully figured out yet. And if we want to say, okay, once we've caged it, okay, we can talk about maybe converting this thing into like something else. But it's weird that we're having this conversation right now.
Well, no. The metaphor is that there are people who have been trying to put this demon into a cage for the last 500 years, and it keeps breaking out of the cage.
No, it does.
And some people are saying, let's kill the demon, so that it stops breaking out of the cage and doing all of these horrible things that it always does.
But like things have significantly gotten better over the last 500 years, like significantly. We have absolutely been able to repeal and to ensure that a lot of the issues that are inherent under capitalism, and I fully agree. What? Sorry, that was, sure. But things are worse over the last 500 years. Absolutely better in the last 10.
Like a little, kind of.
A little. We were on the verge of a global catastrophe, and we
still are.
Okay, I'm not disagreeing that we still are, but also it is way more hopeful than it was 10 years ago. We have and also here's an interesting aspect, that climate change is not inherent to capitalism either, because we have a huge amount of people who are now striving towards hey, let's make sure that we have safe and affordable fuel, and like make sure that all of the shit that we need to like make sure that the ozone doesn't tear itself apart and that climate change isn't an irrevocable disaster. Companies see the writing on the wall and they say, oh, let's start investing in affordable energy. And you see companies like Exxon and Mobil start investing in affordable and renewable energy because they don't want to fucking hold on to gas when they know no one wants to buy this. And I think the reason why this is occurring is because we fucking talked to people and we've said, hey, gas is a problem. Fossil fuels are a problem and it is destroying the environment. And once we're on the same page, the companies will follow suit because they want your fucking money.
It's nowhere near enough. It's just nowhere close.
But like fossil fuel can work. Fossil fuels can absolutely be used in a socialist and communist setting, and there would be industrialization there too.
Well, I mean, not under my socialism, but you know, listen, I'm not.
I don't.
When I say that, okay, I've said this a couple of times, but I'm not sure if you know what I mean.
Okay.
When I say that I'm not a Marxist-Leninist, I am not in favor of something like the Soviet Union or Cuba or Vietnam.
No, I understand. I understand.
And you know,
but I also
those kinds of countries can do economic disasters as well.
Here's what I'll say. Here's what I'll say. Legitimately, your system versus the system that we are currently in. You ask 95% of the people which place they would rather live in, and they would choose the current one.
Wait, my system?
Yeah, your system. Where like.
I think that if you go to people and you tell them, like, in every single experience that I've had, my father is a hardcore Trump Republican, right? And I explained to him the idea that people in their businesses should be able to vote on who their managers are and should be in control of the business instead of the capitalists.
But
he agrees.
I'm not talking about unions. I'm not talking about unions. That's something that I would agree with.
Well, that's cooperatives. But
you're right.
I'm talking about direct democracy.
Yeah,
I'm talking about a democratic economy.
I'm not.
And when you explain that to people, they almost always go, "Yeah, that sounds awesome." Because Americans are pro-freedom, pro-individual liberty, pro-democracy.
I think you misunderstood my point. I would agree with that. That getting people on board with like co-ops and unions is remarkably easier than you would think. That a lot of people are legitimately for that. And that's why I advocate so strongly for people to talk to conservatives a little bit more, because you would be shocked to see how much of your...
I agree. There's a lot. I mean, there's nuance to it, but I do think that people should talk to conservatives.
Yeah. Obviously, there's nuance. Like if someone tells you just like get out of here and calls you like a slur or something, like
I do also think that sometimes with certain things. Okay, you know what? We're not even going to get into that. But I think with certain things, it's more important to make an example out of someone. Like when people are mean to conservatives online, sometimes that is better than convincing them. Sometimes it's more important to make it obvious that something's not okay.
Oh, for sure.
That people don't like it, than to explain it carefully to every single person who's done something wrong.
But I also
why they shouldn't have done it.
I fully agree with that, because we should be generally pretty honest with like how we're conversing. I don't think that I'm anywhere close to changing your mind, but I think that someone listening who is in between us might be like, that's what I'm hoping for, right? Is like, oh, maybe you should understand my point of view because I'm talking to this guy. Does that make sense? That I think that like a lot of those conversations online, you're really talking to the viewers rather than the person in front of you, and that's an unfortunate part of having a conversation online. And that's why I want so many people to talk to the people in person, because this is the worst type of conversation to have. You should be having this thing with the cameras off, talking to your relatives, talking to your in-laws about this shit, because that's going to do way more good than anything that I'm doing right now.
I will say that so I think that people are generally very pessimistic about the value of the internet as a way of bringing people together and getting people to learn new things. I think that people are a little bit too down on that. But I will say that I definitely agree that, socialism starts in your own house. Socialism starts with the dishes. You know,
Sure.
that overthrowing capitalism doesn't start on the internet. It starts in your intimate relationships. It starts in your friends and your family, and creating people power in that way.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with that. But I do think that the internet has this really unfortunate tendency to create these aggressive echo chambers, and that's something that my video definitely was the most advocating for, which is break free from them. Like, start talking to the people around you, because that's the only way that we're going to get people to agree with us.
The way that I would phrase it is make more friends.
Sure, I would agree with that, and be okay with friends who are legitimately, like, I don't know, like a little don't know that one.
That case by case.
Yeah.
Case by case.
Sure. Obviously, if you're I don't know, my brother's like a fucking fascist. Like, I still love the guy. I'm talking to him every day, and like I like you have to talk to him slowly. You have to start bringing him over, and I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that, but it definitely depends on your relationship. And like, if honestly my roommate was talking the same thing that my brother was, probably wouldn't talk to him again. But like, family's different, so.
I think there's also just I think that like a very small percentage of the population can make a really big difference by just organizing well.
Yeah.
But like, if like whatever 1% of communists were out there all actually got together and did something together, that would be huge. And a lot of the times that's the better first move than trying to get to 3% or 5% or whatever it is.
For sure. Stopped like actually start banding together. Like, honestly, I met this communist one time. All he did throughout the whole conversation was shit on Marxist Leninists, and it's like, dude, come on.
That's what I've been doing.
Yeah, I know, that's a joke. It was you. Yeah.
Oh my god, this guy.
Yeah. No, but yeah, I think that we agree with a majority of the prescriptions that we have for society, at least certainly in the short term. Talk to your friends, fucking join unions, and vote for harm reduction, and try to get the people who care about the workers in power. I think that we could agree on that for sure. Is there anything else you wanted to leave out on?
I don't know. I'm sure there's a ton that we disagree on.
Sure. I'm sure there is too. Yeah. I could like say something like, Joe Biden isn't that bad of a president. You'll get down my throat on that one.
Well, I find it a little bit pointless sometimes to constantly be criticizing elected officials, because I think that their actions are very constrained, and it's a little bit like, okay, I sound like a lib when I'm saying this.
You sound like a... Okay, go ahead.
I sound like a liberal when I say this, but I think that elected officials don't have that much power, and that even like getting mad at Joe Biden for not doing this or that, the solution isn't to elect a better guy, and the solution isn't to yell at Joe Biden loud enough until he does the thing that we want.
No, I think
the solution is other stuff.
I think that the president has the biggest self-interest, which is get reelected under your base and make sure that the people, like, I think that elected...
There's a lot of things that he cares about more than getting reelected. And also, it's not just about what the president wants. That there are interests who are...
I don't disagree with that. But I want to make sure that I see Joe Biden do his part, and then I'll criticize the corporations that are getting in his way, or I'll criticize Joe Manchin for getting in his way, or I'll criticize whoever. But I absolutely think that elected officials are constantly making sure that their actions are in line with the people, their representatives' beliefs, and
but also their donors.
Sure. But their donors...
Also they're like, almost all of the elected officials are members of the capitalist class themselves.
Sure.
Because it's sort of a prerequisite to get in that club.
Not
right.
I feel like this is a very absolute statement. that I don't think helps us wiggle in the nuance, which is that sure, representatives absolutely care about their donors in order to make sure that they can get like advertisements out. But at the end of the day, the donors have the exact same number of fucking votes as I do.
No, they kind of have more.
They have more because they have advertising. But I'm saying there's also that part of how many people will actually come out and vote for me. And as an incumbent, you have
that a mayor wants to listen to the business community in their town.
I don't, for sure.
Those businesses are threatening the mayor with leaving the town.
I'm not disagreeing.
The mayor does things that they don't.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying there's an other side of the coin, which is if it's just the business owners and it's fucking over everyone under his city. He's not. There's not enough people who will advocate for the mayor to stay in power when all of them are getting fucked over by this. And I do think that listening to people's self-interest is absolutely something that every elected official is consistently doing.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
I'm saying that Joe Biden is making sure that before he does student loan cancellation, he's seeing how much of his base is liking it. He's seeing how many people are for this, how many people are against this, and can I sway a significant amount of the population to make sure that they're coming out in 2024 for me?
What are the polls on that? Like, what is the
for student loan cancellation?
Yeah.
Not.
What is it, like,
I'm
how
against.
much do people support that?
I'm against student loan cancellation. Like I don't.
You're against student loan cancellation?
Yeah, it's a regressive tax. You're just giving it to the doctors and lawyers who make more money than anyone else. Student loans are owned by like the richest population by a significant chunk.
Right? How about
free college? Yeah.
Cancel student loans.
Okay.
And then we tax rich people more. Like you're mad that like the student loan cancellation is going to go to some rich people.
I'm just saying we have $1 trillion.
The rich people
why do I
like? What does it matter?
Because I'm saying why care about student loans? It's $1 trillion. We have better things that we could do with that. It's $1 trillion to cancel all student loans. Let's do something more, please. Let's do something different, please. Let's focus on free education, which is so much better.
I thought you were talking just now about walking and chewing gum at the same time. That's actually something where we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
When it comes to spending money under the federal deficit?
Well,
like this is real tangible money, and it does. There are absolutely. You should absolutely focus on where that money is absolutely going. And I don't think you can just go, oh, we can do both.
$1 trillion?
Yeah, it's $1 trillion. I could double check those numbers if you'd like.
To cancel student debt?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, how many trillions of dollars was it to do the war in Iraq?
Less than $1 trillion.
I don't think that's true.
To do the war in Iraq, we don't spend what? It's like hold on.
I think we've spent some trillions of dollars in the war in Iraq.
Okay. I'm curious about that. But also this is a non sequitur because like I would if let's say that you're accurate and it's $10 trillion or something, I don't think we should be spending any money just to get money into the hands of the richest, the top 2%. Yeah.
You support college being free?
Absolutely.
So why wouldn't you support student debt cancellation?
Because those people aren't the people who need help. The people who need help are the working class people right now who cannot get into college because it costs too much money and they didn't do well in their schools because fucking their schools are funded by property taxes and they grew up in a poor neighborhood and they can't go anywhere. So the only getting them into college to make sure that they get a good education is one, just good for democracy. It's just good for people. And two, it's to make sure that they get a better job. Absolutely. That's a huge benefit to making sure that the poor don't stay poor and the rich don't stay rich. It's a great way to bridge that gap, to make sure that social mobility is possible. But I don't see people who have already graduated. Graduating is the number one factor when it comes to getting a job. I don't need to do fucking shit for those people who have already gotten a degree. They're fine. They're in the top 2% of earners. And if you look at student debt, the the student debt owned by.
I think that you're trying to empathize with me as a communist by saying like, oh, these rich people, these top 2%.
Wait, hold on. I'm a social democrat. I'm for wealth redistribution just as much as you are. Maybe not just as much, but like.
My problem is not with lawyers and doctors.
But why do we need it?
With Jeff Bezos.
Why, sure, but why the hell do we need to subsidize doctors who are the 1% earners of society? That I don't care. Look,
what are the statistics on this? What percentage of student loan like what amount of that money is going to people in the top 2%?
Sure, that's a great question. Hold on, 1 second. Student debt owned by class.
Because when I think of someone who has a lot of student debt, I imagine a millennial who got a master's.
You know why? It's because we live in this echo chamber known as Twitter, where that's like the huge majority of people who. Hold on one second. I just saw a graph on this. I just looked at this because I made a video yesterday, or maybe it was today, about this, and I saw a graph organized by class, and it was shocking. What was that? So share of monthly debt payments, share of outstanding debt. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, so the lowest quintile, so this is a regressive tax. It's literally a regressive tax. So
a regressive tax.
It's the opposite. It's the opposite of a progressive tax.
Opposite of a progressive tax.
So it's
charging.
No. It's basically it's a tax cut for the rich. That's what aggressive tax means. It's a tax cut for the rich. So there's 5 quintiles of income. I'm pulling this directly from Brookings.edu. The lowest quintile pays 5%, has 5% of that debt. The second quintile is 14%. The middle is 22. The fourth is 32, and the highest is 26. So the quintile should be 20%. So the fourth quintile is overrepresented as well as the highest quintile. So it's hugely stacked. It's hugely stacked.
For like the top like 60 to 80%.
Why not just have why not spend this $1 trillion on a negative tax income that actually will just give money?
80% of people are still working class people.
No, top 40%.
What I'm saying is like the top 40, like the top.
The 2 highest quintiles is 40%.
The top 2, like including the top one.
The top is 20%, and then the one below it is 20%, so 40.
So of the top quintile, like how much of that is like the top 1%? Because like if somebody's
I don't know, but why are we
quintile?
Why do we
like, oh, you're too rich?
No, I'm not saying you're too rich, but I'm saying I don't need to give you my fucking money. I don't think the government needs to give you money. I think you're fine. I think you could chill a little bit. I support lawyers and I support doctors. I think medical institutions are fucking fantastic. I don't need to give you a tax break. Okay? I don't need to make sure that you're not paying your debt in this country. The number one people who will benefit from this are the people who have.
What is the income level in those quintiles? Like how much money are people in the fourth quintile making? Like what is the average?
I'm not sure.
Because if it's somebody that's making like $75,000 a year.
But why is our money going towards them?
Those are the people that were saying that are too rich for us to forgive their student debt?
Yes, you could pay it. You're fine. I don't need to care about you. You're fine. I don't care. Like if you make $120,000, you can pay your fucking debt. Okay. There are people who are strapped with medical debt that we are just for some reason ignoring, who can't afford insurance. Let's make our money towards there, or spend the $20 billion that fix homelessness.
You're saying that the problem is we aren't giving the people in the lower quintiles enough money.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So let's have a negative tax and credit.
I think that that's the issue.
Yes.
That like if you want to like eliminate poverty, then we should be doing that.
Yes.
But like the like saying like, oh, like people who make $80,000 a year have to pay off their debt. Like you're being stingy for those people.
Yeah,
like,
because we have a limited amount of money. Let's make sure it's going in the right place.
Well, I mean, if we're going to talk about going in the right place, half of our entire federal budget is going to the military.
No, it's not. It's not even close to half. We spent more on healthcare than we do on the military.
Well, okay, we're gonna look at this right now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's not even close to half. Now, we do spend more per GDP. And by the way, we want to look at it right now because the military expenditures have decreased significantly since the Iraq War and since we pulled from Afghanistan. But yeah, if you look at the percentage of, it's not even close to 50. We spend more on Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security than the military.
Spends $714 billion. So that's how much it costed the entire military budget? How much has the military budget decreased since we pulled out of Afghanistan?
I don't know. I can look it up. Well, it's an annual budget as well. But yeah, it's. And by the way, that what you're describing right there, we would spend more on student loan cancellation than we do on the entire military budget for the year. That seems like money that we can better spend than giving it to the top 1% of earners.
I don't. You're doing this like
top
OPMC
10%
bad thing.
It's
like
it's weighted towards people who make more money than don't. It's weighted towards the people who make more money. Now, I'm being a little hyperbolic when I say it's going to the top 2% of earners. But absolutely the people who benefit the most from it are doctors who just got out of med school who owe like $120,000 in student debt, which I think it's a huge representation of the echo chambers that we live in.
Why are those people not deserving? I'm
not saying they don't deserve it. I'm saying they're fine, and there are better people that we can talk. There are better people that we can help with $1 trillion.
Okay, but why not just tax them more later? If you think that
let's tax them.
Getting more money from them.
Why are we giving them money? Let's just tax them.
Why don't we just wipe out student debt across the board and then raise taxes on the rich?
Because
why don't we just do that?
Why are we canceling their debt?
Much money from the government.
I don't understand why we're canceling the debt. I don't get.
Okay, so do you think that Joe Biden is going to cancel the debt for the bottom 80%?
Yes,
because that's what he's going to do.
Yes, because people want it. Because that is what people are clamoring for right now. That is the biggest criticism of him right now, and his percentage. What?
I'm not a gambling man.
But
if I were, I would bet that that's not going to happen.
His popularity is tanking, especially amongst millennials, and it's freaking him out.
Who cares?
Why wouldn't he care? He's trying to get rid. That's just. I can't live in this. I can't live in this world where where elected officials don't care about their popularity when they're running for office. That's their biggest concern.
Why would that be their biggest concern?
Because they have to get voted.
People who are millionaires. Why do they care more? Why do they definitely care more about sticking to whatever beliefs they have and to enacting whatever ideology they have than they care about being reelected. And I think that that's borne out by the fact that these elected officials are constantly doing things that are unpopular. I think that Joe Biden
is
probably going to lose to whichever neo-fascist Republican that gets run in 2024.
I mean, you said that, but he beat Trump.
He's not going to do any of the things. Okay, yeah, it's going to be Trump. But what I'm saying is that... Wait, what? Say it again?
Well,
You're saying that he's going to beat Trump in 2024?
I said you say that, but he beat Trump.
It's in a different context. That was after 4 years of Trump. That was during COVID. And he
sure.
did worse. He did significantly
What I'm trying to say is it's absolutely accurate that
the Democrats are more willing to follow their dumbass neoliberal ideology into losing another election than they are willing to break that in order to do something popular. And I think that that's out.
If you do something that's popular, you're going to get reelected. I'm lost as to
what I'm saying is that the things that they would have to do that are popular are things that they don't want to do.
Like what?
Like canceling student loan debt, or like legalizing marijuana, or like any of the popular things that they could do. Right?
Sure, but I think
the reason they haven't done those things so far is because they don't want to, because they're liberal.
Well, okay. Well, one, if you're saying liberals aren't for legalizing marijuana, I don't know what world you're living in. I don't.
Okay, and maybe that's a little bit much. But
Sure.
you get what I'm saying. They're capitalists.
Like legalizing marijuana and what was your other example? Like things that are popular. Like,
huh? What are you saying?
What were your two examples? You said legalizing marijuana, but you took that one back. What was your other example?
Student loan debt.
Student debt. Hold on. Let me look up the popularity of student loan debt cancellation.
Well, what do you think that they're going to do that's popular?
Well, I think they're doing that popular. There's a whole bunch of stuff that like is popular to their base. The massive amounts of like LGBTQ
maybe like that's popular in general.
Popular in general? I don't know.
It's
We're pretty fucking stratified as a country right now. There's not a lot that we can do that's like gonna that the Democrats are gonna love and the Republicans are gonna like be okay with. We're pretty stratified, I think.
Okay. You know what? Let's stop talking about electoral politics.
Okay, that's like my strength. Okay.
There's just a lot to it, and there's a lot of details, and we have to like look at the fucking pie charts.
Sure, but that's why I gravitate towards there, because I feel
there is a tiny little disagreement.
Yeah.
That is actually a big disagreement.
Okay.
From earlier, where you said that if you could keep private property, but somehow get rid of imperialism, homelessness, all of the negative effects of capitalism, then private property in itself would not be a moral harm.
Yes.
I disagree. I think that it's fundamentally wrong. I think that capitalists, people who siphon money off of the top of a business, are people who are they are parasites. These people are middlemen. They're taking money from people who deserve to have that money. They're stealing.
I don't think that when you look at something like I don't think that when you like I gave the example, I forgot what your response was, but like when you have someone who just like you pay someone $10, like even on a micro level, why is that an ethical issue?
The level is literally just different.
What?
Like,
can you explain again?
Is that you can't take the micro level and expand it to this other.
But you're making an ethical argument. I could anything that you say is an ethical evil, like for example slavery. Well, you can't just expand it to the micro level because I can't just own a person. Yeah, I can't own a person. It's fundamentally ethically inaccurate from micro to macro. I think all ethical harms, when done on an individual versus societal level, are both they're wrong regardless.
Do you understand the argument that I'm making about capitalist exploitation?
I don't.
That when a business, when somebody who doesn't contribute to the business is at like only because of the legal construct of private property.
But they invested in the business. The business has benefited from them. They're able.
No, it has not.
They're able to invest in.
They have not contributed anything.
They're able to invest in the training of the workers, in the building that they work in, like all of the.
Was built by the builders, not by the investors.
But who paid those builders?
The investor.
Yes.
Is paying the builders to build the building.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes, that's all I'm saying.
But the investor is making more money from the exploitation of the people in the building than the amount that they paid the builder.
Yes, of course, because they're self-interested. But here's the biggest thing.
Just have some sort of cultural.
Here's my biggest thing. Here's my biggest thing.
They do.
I feel like you're looking at trade. And you're saying, trade of like capital for work.
I'm saying that certain things shouldn't be able to be traded. Shouldn't be able to be treated as commodities.
I don't. For example, private property. Yeah.
Well, for example, private property, but like there are examples of things that could be commodified, but that aren't because it would fucking suck. Like your organs, right? You literally cannot sell your organ.
For sure. But I think
because if you could, that would be terrible.
But so one, I would say that commodifying work is totally okay because I think as a society.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the problem is commodifying an entire business like an operation, like a group of people who are together creating value, there's somebody else who is not creating the value who gets to decide how they all live their lives because they happen to own money, but exploiting other people in the same way.
I think you're looking at the self-interest of the investor, and I totally agree that the investor is self-interested, but the worker is also self-interested as well. And God, I sound like such a fucking libertarian right now. I hate it. But legitimately, I don't like Ayn Rand. Okay, libertarians, shut the hell up. But like the ideas of objectivism, that the fact that the worker is coming in legitimately in order to put in work that they feel comfortable giving in order to get a benefit out of it is sometimes like why isn't that exploitation if they're voluntarily giving something in? And I know you're not going to call it voluntary, but under my system it's voluntary. Voluntarily.
Under your system it's voluntary. What do we live in, grid world? We live in real life where people work because they have to, because otherwise they get kicked out of their house.
But in my perfect system, it's voluntary. Because there will be a safety net, there will be unions, there will be the bargaining powers will be equal.
It's fundamental to capitalism that like homelessness is not a bug of capitalism, it's a feature.
But
it's a necessary part of the whole
thing. It's not necessary. We already went over this, that homelessness and imperialism are not necessary to capitalism. They can exist outside of it.
If you made it so that people were not punished for not working, then capitalism would work worse. Like it would not be able to exploit people as well. And that's the reason that capitalism pushes to make people who are unemployed to make their lives miserable. Because it benefits from that.
We need in any sort of society as many able-bodied people to work to make sure that society is flourishing and functioning. Do you agree with that?
Not really, no, because I think that people could work way less than they do.
I'm not for sure.
Society we would maintain.
I'm not saying 40 hours a week. I'm not saying 40 hours a week. Okay, but I am saying
5. Huh?
5 hours a week?
That's little. That's pretty.
Chill
small,
a little bit.
I said let's be ambitious. You know.
Let's be ambitious and say like 25. Okay, 23. What is? Okay, all right. Let's say 20 hours a week. Okay, say I can think of I can imagine that society. Okay.
Okay. Go on.
Well, no. My question is, in your society, people are going to need to work at least like 20 hours a week as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. In my society, people still do have like the things that people produce require some amount of labor.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess my question is, what's wrong with an investment? What's wrong with an incentive?
Doing way extra labor because there are these middlemen called capitalists.
I feel like the cap. If you're referring to the investors are providing a substantial good into that business by.
No, they aren't. The money that they are putting into the business, that's not value that they are providing. But that's just something that they have. Other people, like the whole.
But you could say the same thing about workers. You could say the exact same thing about workers because workers.
Because the workers.
They're just putting.
They don't just have something.
They do. They have labor. They're just putting forward all of their labor, and they're getting more than they deserve. Because why else would they show up? They're getting more than they're putting in. It's trade can be trade is
just not exist.
Trade is not a zero-sum game where if one person is getting something out of it more than they put in, that means that someone is losing something.
If there were no workers in a business, if there were only investors, it wouldn't work.
Yeah, for sure.
If there were only workers in a business, they could own the building.
But they would be the investors. There needs to be some sort of Okay.
That's capitalism.
Okay.
That's socialism. Socialism is
I know.
the dichotomy between the capitalist and the worker.
But I don't think it's necessary because we need investors, we need workers. They're going to be self-interested. They're going to get more than they put in. Why do we need to combine?
Because capitalism is a machine that kills people. And so all of the problems that you have are problems with this fundamental thing that I'm criticizing. If we don't get rid of that fundamental thing that I'm criticizing, it's going to happen again. It's a moral imperative.
I don't see it as a moral imperative. I'm sorry, man. Look, and here's the thing. We can agree on so much shit. We can agree on so much shit about resolving those fucked bargaining powers that we currently have. I just don't. I don't know. I think that it's totally okay for two parties to come together, the investors and the workers, and put things together and get more.
It's not a fair deal. And like,
I'm not. We can make it a fair deal
though. You're acting like the money that the investors own is part of them. That like the relationship between somebody and the thing that they own is a relationship just between them and the thing that they own. It's not. The relationship, the property relationships is a relationship between the property owner and everybody else. It's not a relationship between the person and the thing. Does that make sense?
No, not. Sorry, I don't know if I followed that one.
So liberalism, capitalism has this ideology that when somebody owns something, that is a relationship between the person and the thing.
Sure.
Which isn't true.
Okay.
When somebody owns something, that is a relationship between the person and all of the other people. Because what it means is that, like, say somebody owns your house,
okay,
right? So, like a landlord owns the house that you live in.
Okay.
What that means is that if you don't give money to the landlord, they can hire police to come kick you out of the place where you live.
Sure.
That is a relationship between you, the police, and the landlord. That's not a relationship between the landlord and the house. It's not that the landlord owns the house and therefore they get to do whatever they want. We have a social system that we have created, and we could create other ones, where the landlord has this power over you, and we don't have to live in that society.
Okay.
That's not like a natural, it's not natural, it's not normal for us to like live in a society where people can own each other's houses.
But
like that.
when we say like, I think
like
that there's
like liberalism likes to promote the idea that we don't live in a culture, that ownership is just something like natural and normal. And that all of our existing rules and understandings of ownership are things that are inherent to the universe.
I don't think it's inherent to the universe. I just think it provides a lot of net good, and a lot of harm reduction comes when we can trade so freely between things that we own.
Not with trading.
I understand that, but like your problem.
Capitalism is a system where a capitalist owns capital and then has to rent that out to workers who provide their labor in exchange.
Again, I don't see the issue. I don't see the issue with an investor coming in and providing.
The issue is that the investor could just be the workers.
But
the workers could just own the building.
Sure.
They would make more money, the prices would be better, and they're working.
Why do you think the prices would be better? Why do you wait, hold on. Where do you
okay, maybe not the prices would be better.
Because almost all
consumers,
almost all functions,
the workers,
almost all
workers' lives would be better.
Almost all studies of co-ops done in this country have almost explicitly said.
I said that it's not about the prices.
No, but it's also
there are also cooperatives though, where
sometimes
they're owned by the consumers and the workers.
Okay, but consumer co-ops, like a credit union. Like I don't think that you would call that socialism.
I would.
You'd call a credit union a socialism?
Yes. I mean, every system has parts of the next system in it. Right, there are parts of feudalism that were capitalism before the whole system was capitalism. Right, every single even you could say that a library is socialism.
Wait, I thought we were just okay. I don't know if I get
socialism is a whole system, right? But there are parts of it existing in the current system, and the future system that we're going to call socialism is going to involve an expansion of those pieces that already exist.
Sure.
Into a much larger system.
Sure. I guess
and like that's true from every switch between different economic systems. That was true of feudalism to capitalism, that within feudalism there were always the seeds of capitalism, and that those things grew into capitalism itself.
Sure. I feel like we're being pretty vague with the idea
of about something like a credit union.
I don't know how you
an amount of capital that is owned collectively by people who put
by
in
the consumers
money.
Not by the workers.
Well, I mean, a credit union, like this is money that is like people are saving and like putting together into the credit union, and then they get to vote on what to loan the money out to.
Yeah.
That is collective ownership of capital.
Sure, by the consumers who aren't contributing anything to the business other than investments.
You got a point.
Thank
got
you.
a point.
Thank you.
Because it's owned by it's not the same as the workers.
Thank you.
But but I think that you understand my point.
I do.
Right?
I get your point.
That if a business is owned by the people who work there, then they will have better working conditions.
For sure. I will say I do think we have to cut it short tonight. Or
right.
not short, but
Well, not short. I mean,
how long has it been? It's been about 2 hours.
Something like that.
Yeah, I do have to get going. But I really appreciate
talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, and if you wanna discuss any of these further, we can definitely have another conversation another time. Just hit me up.
Cool. Sounds great.
Okay.
Talk to you later.
Yep. See you, man.